Next, we are going to move on to our Knutson Award. And this is a very special night. We are welcoming Jay Friedman and his wife Judith to this ceremony. Jay has had an outstanding career as a clinician, as a researcher, and as a fellow public health practitioner. Tonight we are honoring the giants in dental public health. I want to thank Dr. Jane Winthrop and the members of the awards committee for the thoughtful deliberation this year. I know it was a very competitive process, and we're very glad, we're all very glad that Jay is the recipient this year. So I would like to say a couple of words about Dr. Knutson. John W. Knutson was the first dentist to be president of the American Public Health Association in 1957. He did work along with Dr. Henry Klein during 1937 to 1947, where they did studies of the epidemiology of dental caries. In the 1940s, Dr. Knutson studied outcomes of dental referral programs and systematically researched topical fluoride effectiveness. He made several contributions to the understanding and implementation of the roles of dental health and dentistry in public health. This award has been presented continually since 1982 to honor an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to improve oral health in the United States. Its recipients have demonstrated sustained and exemplary accomplishments in the field of dental public health. An award of $1,500 is provided by Colgate Oral Pharmaceuticals of the Colgate-Palmolive Company. A silver tray commemorating this award is presented also by the members of the oral health section. The list of recipients of this award is extremely impressive. I would like to ask at this moment if there are any former recipients in the audience. Will you please stand up? So again, we are extremely grateful to all Colgate Pharmaceuticals for their generous support of this award. Their support is long-standing, covering many years. Tabata Stanberry from Colgate is here tonight, and of course she's joining us in this ceremony. And Tabata, would you care to say some words about this award?
Just thank you again for letting us be here to support you guys.
So now I would like to introduce Dr. Jane Winthrop, who is going to continue with the ceremony.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
So the Giants won the World Series. Soon it'll be Halloween, this city's favorite holiday. APHA, the Oral Health Section Knutson Award ceremony. What a great time to be in San Francisco. I've been a member of the Knutson Award Committee for several years. And to my knowledge, there have never been so many nomination letters submitted for one person. The letters were not only numerous, but some of them were quite lengthy as well, and eloquent, detailing the lifelong accomplishments of the nominee. So it was very easy to chair the committee this year and come to the conclusion that Dr. Jay Friedman should be the recipient of our section's highest honor. So I'd like to thank the committee members, Catherine Hayes, David Capelli, Bob Eisman, and Scott Tomar for their help with this process. When I first called Jay to tell him that he was this year's Knutson Award recipient, he was speechless. I wish more of you could have experienced that moment. So the audience is in for a real treat tonight. We have three people who will tell you about the life and times of Dr. Jay Friedman and why he is worthy of this award. Alice Horowitz, John Brown, and David Nash the dental public health version of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, will do the honors this evening. Alice Horowitz is a research associate professor in the Office of the Dean at the University of Maryland School of Public Health and former senior scientist at NIDCR. John Brown is professor emeritus and former chair of community dentistry at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio School of Dentistry. And David Nash is the William Willard Professor of Dental Education and Professor of Pediatric Dentistry at the University of Kentucky. So I'm going to turn the program over now to Dr. Horowitz, and I hope you all enjoy the ceremony.
Whoops, not that much, I can't see. No happy reading. Well, as long as I can figure out how to push the forward button, we're in like Flint. First of all, I want to say is that Jay asked me to do this introduction, which I thought was very brave of him. But secondly, you have to know that he really, really helped me do this. And I mean, really helped me. And you will see at the very end what I mean by that. But the other thing is you need to know is that Jay was born in Brooklyn. And rumor has it that there is this really, really gorgeous photograph of this beautiful baby on a bare rug. But nobody seems to be able to find it for this presentation. However, it'll probably show up at some other time. So we're going to move on instead to 1930 when he was several years old, and you can see that he is already standing quite tall and rearing to go. Next is, he's a pre-dental student. This is in 1936. You can see up in the little cloud over there that he clearly is already thinking about third molars. And it is a third molar. Then we sort of jumped into 1946 when he is working in Mexico, and you can also see that he's working very, very hard there. Here is at about the same time where...
I think you might be turning it off in another room and they're turning it on.
Oh.
That's what was happening in the other room.
Here he is, and already he has demonstrated that he is a photographer. Forget the dentistry part, this guy is a photographer, and hence the photographic background for all of these things. And then this also is about 25 years later, and he mimics the past. The difference is, you will see, I can check here, that there's a difference in color. The growth is about the same. Then in 1947, he decided to hitchhike from New York to California, round trip. And as you can see, the first one, he's got his thumb out. The second one, when the car passed him by, going quite fast, that, you know, he's like, what's happening here? And then finally, actually we did Photoshop on the bottom of him because I think he was giving him the finger, not, you know. But, you know, that is up for discussion. And then this is a photograph when he graduated in 1948 from dental school. And it says, he resolves to live sanely in a mad world. I'm not going to ask what you think about the world today, but we can only imagine. And this is a very militant dentist in 1952 when he was drafted into the Army. And this shows when he was actually putting together, no surprise, as a photographer at work, where he's putting together a photo exhibit for a dental society meeting. Always the consummate photographer. This is a picture of where, when he returned from being in the military, a place, location of his practice. And when we hone in on the sign, if you look way up here in the corner, above the red sign, you see the little tiny sign. This is when nobody was allowed to advertise as a dentist, couldn't be any bigger than a certain spot. And there he was, for a short period of time, practicing dentistry. Then, in 1955, he became the dental director of Group Dental Health Corporation in Seattle. Very thoughtful. Well, he didn't take to that too well for too long and decided to go get an MPH at Michigan. And was there for a year, got his MPH, and there, wouldn't you know, he's doing dentistry illegally with a 3-unit anterior bridge, helping out a dental student. This is not Photoshop, this is the real thing. And then, and you'll all remember, or many of you will remember John Engel and Jay, and who worked together for a long, long time. And they were conspiring at that time in 1973 to train dental therapists. And here is Jay doing a APHA survey in Cuba in 1976. And these are dental nurses there. So he has a long history of being interested in dental therapists, and of course a lot of work. Here he is in a medical dental expedition in Nepal in 1977, and closer up, he didn't just do hiking, of course, was providing dental care, and this was doing a free clinic there. And I have to say he probably was removing third molar. And here he is, looking all spiffied up in tie and all, a dental director at U.S. Administrators, and from 1973 to 1980. And in between a number of things you have to understand is that he also was on faculties. He did many, many other kinds of things as a consultant and all that. And I'm not sure what this means. It's just that it was provided to me, so here it is. And we'll let Jay explain what this means later, not now, but later. Then. And this isn't photoshopped either. And you believe that, I have a bridge right over here that I'll show you. But anyhow, they really did practice dentistry. And this is demonstrating his belief in diversity in practice and in life. And this was a 2010 celebration of former colleagues and staff members that we worked with for many, many years. And this is, most of you know that he is really a very good tennis player. And so, but he didn't always use tennis balls. He did third molars. And then I'm going to bring you up to much more recent times. I don't know how many of you know that Jay, in 2009, was given an award by the board of the, I shouldn't say board, it is the board, of the journal of APHA. He was given the Author of the Year award. And this is incredible, that he got this. And the topic was on third molars. And he did so much work in this area, and has done, continued to do this, never gives up, never misses a shot. And this is when he was at ADIA, more recently, with two of his favorite pals, and just different kinds of hats, of course, and again, a little bit of Photoshop going on here. But this is a publication that I'm showing you what I could pull up here, but I have to tell you is one day I was running out of the house, grabbed a newspaper with me, I was leaving town, and as I'm going through the Washington Post, what did I see but this article in the Washington Post by Jay. Jay's everywhere, and he's always on the right side of the fence. This time it's asking, are these x-rays necessary? So I actually brought the piece with me, Jay, and I'm going to give it to you as one of your presents for tonight, because it's all a mess. It has been scattered around my office by so many people, because everybody doesn't realize that you don't have to have x-rays every 6 months or every 12 months. But we're trying to teach them at the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland. So this is a group of college students celebrating the retention of their third molar. And you can see that they're really happy. They didn't have to go through this. And so it's just one of the many, many accomplishments of Jay. And many, many more college students and youth are so happy. And here are the oral surgeons belly up to the bar following the release of the APHA report on the third molar. And they have never recovered. And I know you know, and somebody else is going to speak to this, but of course, what really has happened is they've had to revise their promises and everything, and you know they no longer make blanket statements that all third molars should be removed. So Jay has had a tremendous impact on many, many people's lives for this. So, and here Jay is about to run away. No, look at that babe on the left there. He's just suiting up because he's always on the fast track. Always. He's always ready. And I have to also say that Jay, no matter what you ask him to do, he always says yes. Always says yes. He's really, really good. And I'm about to make another request to him after the award session. And then he wanted me to show you all of his family, and everybody is here in the back, and we'll all get to meet them later. And this is a self-portrait by Jay, 2012. And I have to thank not only Jay for all of his Photoshop work, but also and for Jay, thank you for trying to live sanely in this mad, mad world. You've done a beautiful job so far. Just keep up the good work. And I also thank you for the Photoshop stuff that you sent me, but I also have to thank a former colleague of mine who, every time I'm asked to do one of these presentations, I run and ask Jane, can you help me? And she does, because she's pretty good at Photoshop also. Anyhow, thank you everybody, and congratulations.
Alice, you're a very hard act to follow, and it's particularly difficult because I don't have any slides. They're on this computer, but they're completely inaccessible. But I'm putting a positive spin on this because a long time ago when we all used Kodachrome slides, they really were slides. I heard a lecturer say, one day I'm going to give a dental lecture with no slides, and then I'll know that I probably had something substantive to say. And Jay, I hope that's true. I first met Jay at LAX airport. You meet a lot of people in airports, and you forget 99.9% of them, but I didn't forget Jay. And do you remember that? You were meeting... You were meeting John Jago off a Qantas flight that I happened to be on, and you very graciously took me to my hotel. But that was just the beginning. I certainly remembered you right from that day. I really only want to make a couple of points, but maybe the most important point I'll try to make is Jay's tenacity. Where does this come from? He has extraordinary application and tenacity, and I would like to think that it owes something, well, it probably owes a lot to his parents, but I would think it probably owes something to Max Shane. Max Shane received the Knutson Award in 1990 and was a collaborator with Jay in his early career at UCLA about health services research and issues of quality assessment in dentistry. Now, Max had collaborated with Harry Bridges. Harry Bridges was an Australian who was the president of the West Coast Longshoremen. Now, the East Coast Longshoremen were very much involved in mafioso tactics and stuff like that, but the West Coast ones were real unionists. Anyway, Harry Bridges and Max Shane stood up to Senator McCarthy. If you're worried about Wisconsin these days, there is a history of this sort of thing in Wisconsin. And it was Senator McCarthy. And he seemed to think, he was the exemplar of the maxim that patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. Because it seemed as if prepaid dental care or some form of dental insurance was so unacceptable to Senator McCarthy that you should be deprived of liberty because you espoused it. Well, I just think that Jay's undaunted in pursuit of scientifically, ethically, and well-founded health policy in the face of extended dental professional self-interest probably owes quite a bit to Max's example. And that's the first point that I would like to make. Now, Jay, as Alice referred to Consumer Reports, but Jay published, initially it was published by Consumer Reports, his book, The Intelligent Consumer's Guide to Dental Health, How to Maintain Your Dental Health and Avoid Being Overcharged and Overtreated. Went to 2 editions. And I think it's a singularly important contribution to informing the public about the intricacies and obfuscations of dental services and cost. This book contained a scientifically correct account of why early caries lesions shouldn't be restored, but arrested and prevented. And it did this at a time when textbooks of operative dentistry were in denial of the caries process and certainly didn't mention any such thing. I put this book on a student recommended reading list because dental students, I thought, should know how a well-informed public is understanding dental care and what they can be taught to understand it better. But I ran into a deanlet who had no idea what I was talking about. Jay, I just remind you, we've talked about this book in the past, when you do the 3rd edition, you did agree you're going to do a chapter about the informed Medicaid dental patient or parent. Don't forget. Now, as Alice referred, Jay regularly contributes to Consumer Reports, and the last one I found was February of this year, as a matter of fact. Now, the article that Jay published in our journal, American Journal of Public Health, 2007, on the prophylactic extraction of third molars, a public health hazard, was published under the rubric of health policy and ethics. That's what it was headed. Cochrane and other reviews had already confirmed the science of this, and Jay focused on the economics, the risk-benefit, the ethics, and the justice foregone by this ridiculous, excessive, and so-called prophylactic procedure. And he followed that up the next year in 2008 by, he led the effort in establishing APHA policy, the opposition to prophylactic removal of third molars, and at the hearings, on the APHA policy hearings, the astonishing claim was made by the proponents and financial beneficiaries of this iatrogenic treatment that in their view the policy was unproven and so the status quo should continue. And they apparently had never ever heard of primum non nocere, first do no harm, and these same people are now, I understand, fighting a rearguard action to promulgate their own so-called evidence-based recommendations, which we await with bated breath, I'm sure. Well, I'm a great admirer, Jay, of your tenacity, because what we have to understand is action doesn't follow the science. It requires enormous tenacity and application and leadership to get this done, and you've provided that over and over again about so many issues, and I've only mentioned, I think, 2. So it's my great pleasure, and I know I speak for everybody, in honouring J. Friedman tonight with the John W. Knutson Distinguished Service Award for 2012.
Well, it was just after the Surgeon General's report, along with a few individuals, I had begun to discuss with the Indian Health Service the potential of adding dental therapists to the oral health workforce in the United States, and had actually begun to prepare for sabbatical in New Zealand to study dental therapists in the School of Dental Service there. From somewhere deep in my subconscious, the name Friedman emerged, and I'm not sure why, but it emerged in the context in conjunction with the idea of dental therapists, of whom at that time I really did not know very much, but had a great deal of interest. Brief review of the literature took me to Jay's classic article in 1972 in the Journal of the American Dental Association, and as they say, the rest is history between Jay and myself. I contacted Jay at that time by email and was rewarded with a box full of information that stretched back many years on the history and contribution of dental therapists in New Zealand. However, more importantly, I was rewarded as a result of that email with a friendship that has become extremely dear to me because it's a friendship with a dear human being. Alice has summarized with her slides, with much of Jay's illicit photoshopping, the remarkable achievements that Jay has had in dental public health, as has John. We have prepared a very detailed review of his contributions in the program that you have, with his CV basically. But now I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about Jay, the person that I know. Jay's a gadfly. He's always been a gadfly. And he always will be. Being an iconoclast is a part of his DNA. He courageously, and as John has suggested, with tenacity challenges traditionally held assumptions. I think sometimes every traditionally held assumption. He is outspoken. He can be brusque. He's a curmudgeon. He suffers fools very poorly. He has challenged the establishment over and over and over with his vision for a more realistic, a more ethical, more just approach to healthcare in this country, care that's based on sound science and care that focuses on the public good. In the relatively 11 short years I have known Jay, I have learned what a kind, caring, loving human being he really is. I suspect I've come to know Jay better than most anyone else save his family. It's a rare day that passes that we do not communicate by email, many times multiple emails. My email archive has literally thousands of communications from J. Friedman, and if anyone were ever wanting to publish the letters of J. Friedman, it would be an insurmountable task. In fact, our actual face-to-face communication can probably be numbered on one hand, maybe with a couple of extra fingers. However, we are fast friends, sharing vulnerabilities with one another, affirming one another. Jay is my support system. Whenever I have an issue, either professionally or personally, I seek Jay's counsel. It's always wise counsel. Jay is the person I go to. I go to personally. Jay's at the top of the people that I admire in this life. He's so talented, erudite, has a capacious mind. If you need an article or a reference on most any topic that relates to dentistry and dental public health, all you have to go to is Jay and his extraordinarily organized computing filing system, one that I have no way of understanding. His facility with computers is truly remarkable. Jay is a superb writer and editor, as many of you know. do not, I repeat, do not, send Jay a manuscript that you'd like his opinion on unless you're willing to have it returned with track changes that suggest he stabbed himself when reading it and bled to death before he sent it. I know. Actually, the first paper I published on dental therapists in the Journal of Dental Education, I sent it to Jay and said, Jay, read this. And he wrote me back before we'd even, this was early in our relationship, and he wrote me back. He said, David, I've never edited one of your papers before. You just need to know, I need your permission that I am an extremely difficult editor. The manuscript came back and I didn't even recognize it. Jay is an amazing athlete. Well, I think the Photoshop did him a little better than he actually is. But he plays tennis almost every day, even singles at his advanced age, and if I can trust him, which I generally do, he wins many of the matches that he plays. He's a talented photographer, as you've already seen, with thousands of photos cataloged from his many years as a shutterbug. He can Photoshop with the best of them, and sometimes he creates images that are really quite revisionist history, and I have the room to testify to that today. I'm a hugger. And those of you that know me know that I like to hug people. And many of my emails I send to colleagues that have been friends for a long time, I sign with hugs. This was somewhat foreign to Jay when we first began. And after a few years, I began to sign my emails to him with hugs. And he commented about it. Then with some degree of astonishment and joy, one day I received an email from Jay signed, Hugs, Jay. We've become fast friends. And today, I receive emails from him that are signed, or that I signed to him, Love, David. And the return to me, Love, Jay. Erik Erikson characterized the last psychosocial stage in his 8 ages of life as being the tension between integrity and despair. Despair would realize one had not lived up to his or her potential as a human being, or integrity in knowing one had lived life to the fullest. Jay has lived a life of integrity. Jay has always actualized his full potential and has sought to do so, and he continues to do so even today. What a role model he is for each and every one of us. Today, it is fascinating to me that, very special, to have developed my closest personal friend in the winter of my life and in the winter of his. Jay, this award is long overdue. Congratulations to you, my dear friend.
Thank you, David, John, and Alice, for your wonderful presentations. They really show us, from a very funny perspective, how accomplished and deserving, how accomplished Jay is and how deserving of this award is. His many accomplishments are an inspiration for all of us who are new and not so new in the discipline. So as a section chair, I'm especially honored to be presenting this award to you tonight, Jay. So now I'm going to ask Dr. Jay Wainter to come and present this award with me. So in addition to this plaque, Jay receives a check for $1,500.
David has told me. Thank you, Oscar.
Here's your check, huh?
Alice showed you that slide which said, "I hate this." It really comes from my dental office. You know, so often a patient would sit in the chair and they say, "Oh God, I hate this." And I got so tired of hearing it, and I finally had a young friend of mine who I must say was never sober. Or he was sober, but he was never off of marijuana. And that's why it was really a very imaginative plaque that he made for me. And I had it in the operatory, and every time a patient came in and sat down and said, "Oh, I hate this," I would say, "Well, so what else is new?" And it really worked. It was sort of like a tranquilizer. I never prescribed tranquilizers. While I'm on that subject, I might add, patients would sometimes come in to you and sit down in the chair and say, "Oh, doctor, I'm really so nervous." And I would reply, "Well, it's perfectly okay for you to be nervous, but you really don't want to make me nervous. So why don't you just relax?" And that was a great tranquilizer, too. But, you know, I asked Alice if I was supposed to say anything. And I said, "Would it be all right if I just said thanks?" And she said yes. So I'm not going to quite say that yet, but I was thinking of it. And I did finally decide that I would make a few remarks, and I did write a few things down someplace. Did I leave them? Oh, I don't have them here. And then I received a shock yesterday. Scott Presson remarked to me that, "Well, are you prepared for your 15 minutes remarks?" And I said, 15 minutes? Nobody told me about that. And so I had something like 2 minutes. So I know, to begin with, first of all, I do want to thank the committee. I question their judgment, but I thank them. And I really, a couple of things. It was amazing to me watching those slides, how little we seem to change over the years. I thought if I had really grown a beard for this occasion, I would have changed even less. But I do have to thank, or at least express my appreciation. I'm not thanking you. I'm expressing my appreciation to Jane, to Alice, David, and to John for those remarks, which are a little perplexing to me because I really find it difficult to know who they were talking about. I mean, we all have illusions about ourselves, but seldom do they make you sound as though you're sort of so idealistic and purposeful. It mentions tenacity. I had no choice in terms of tenacity. You know, it was just that when I wrote an article on the third molars, people started asking me questions. In fact, it was really after the article was published, it was Alice who forced me into a continuation of this. She was the one that proposed that we develop a policy. And again, as you know, with Alice is like Myron Lukian. only in the sense that her request is not a request. It's not even a command, it's a directive. So anyway, I'm much indebted to Alice for getting me into a lot of difficulty that I've had. But anyway, I was going to start out by saying my deepest appreciation to Alice, Jane, and so forth, for overlooking my faults. My faults which have been well enumerated this evening, and for affording me this recognition. The only problem is they missed all of my faults, but I am not going to enumerate them. And they are many, I can assure you. I think John Knutson would really be amused and probably pleased by my selection. He was chair of the Department of Community Dentistry at UCLA when I was first appointed there as a researcher, not at the School of Dentistry, at the School of Public Health. to study medical staff organization in hospitals, which was interesting because I knew nothing about medical staffs, I knew nothing about hospitals, and this was a sociological study of organization, and I knew nothing about sociology. But the senior project physician at UCLA did read some of the papers that I had written, and he thought that I was capable at least of writing. Well, I told him I was capable of writing fiction. He didn't appreciate that very much. But no, really, people don't understand that sociology is really fiction. You just hope that it approximates reality. And so anyway, we were very fortunate in this book. But at any rate, when I met John Knutson after I came to the faculty at the School of Public Health, I went over and said hello to him. And I also gave him a copy of the guidelines that I had written for evaluation of dental care. I had a fellowship after I got my MPH, and he looked at this cookbook, and I tried to explain to him that what I was trying to do is put everything in that I could possibly think of, and then let people who are interested in doing evaluations select what they think is important. So it was a guide. It wasn't intended to be a blueprint to apply to office evaluations. Well, he looked at it, and he really thought I was off the wall. And he even advised some of his younger colleagues at the school that perhaps they shouldn't get too close to me, that I was a little bit crazy. And, but in his last years, after he retired, he called me a couple of times, and he said to me one day, he said, "Did you read that article in the journal? Probably the journal for the American Dental Association?" he asked. And I said, "Yes," I replied. And he said, "Did you understand it?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, neither did I." And so our minds met. Anyway, I decided to become a dentist when I was 13. My father was a dentist, so I was kind of following in his footsteps. And I also decided that I was a socialist in those days, which really, I shouldn't say those days, still do, which is essentially a belief in a cooperative society. I won't go into that in detail. But it was around 1939, and it was, being a radical of any sort was kind of dangerous, even being an advocate or a supporter of Franklin Delano Roosevelt had its risks. But I felt that being a dentist, you could really be independent. You'd have your own business. You could really think what you wanted, say what you wanted, well, not necessarily do what you wanted, but you could certainly have an independence that you would not have if you were working for other people. There'd be no one to fire you for speaking your mind. So I went to dental school. I was about age 17 when I entered, and it was an educational experience that raised serious doubts about becoming a dentist. But my father urged me to just hang on there, get your degree, do whatever you want, but at least you'll always be able to make a living. Well, you know, in a way that's the way it turned out, except I didn't believe in solo practice. I believed in group practice. Not that I had any, well, I shouldn't say I had any experience with it. I did have experience with it. I was in the Air Force for almost 2 years as a dentist, and that's where I learned how to take out third molars. It took me about 2 weeks working with a young dentist who was very good at doing third molar surgery. It was really interesting. It was kind of fun. I enjoyed doing it. It was a lot better than the first time I took out a wisdom tooth on my cousin. Just out of dental school. I had him in the chair for 4 hours. Wow. And I didn't know at that time that you were supposed to cut up the bone, cut up the tooth, not the bone. I tell you, I did a big access opening to get that tooth out. Why he didn't end up with paresthesia, I really don't know. And we're still good friends. But at any rate, as a member of a group practice and getting involved with the dental cooperative, I felt that we had to develop some sort of protocols, standards, guides, so that if a patient joined or a member joined the dental co-op and went to one dentist or another dentist, they'd still be getting basically the same standard of care. And that was when I first wrote my first protocols. And I have to tell you that really, even at that early stage, believed in dental therapists, even though I wasn't exactly sure what they were. But I do know, I don't know if any of you noticed, but I do have my credentials. This is my dental therapist medallion, and I am the only dentist, possibly in the world, but certainly in the United States, that possesses one. You can't get them. And David says I should bequeath it, as he keeps reminding me that I've reached that senior stage in life. Anyway, John mentioned something about my experience working with Max Shane. I originally came down to Southern California after I had, after I left the dental co-op, I was still up in Seattle, and I was going to travel through Canada, Saskatchewan. I wrote a letter to the Tourist Bureau asking for some information about Saskatchewan. I heard that it was kind of a radical province and socialistic government. Thought it might be interesting. So this person in the Travel Bureau in Saskatchewan, which was in the same building as the Department of Public Health, saw that the letterhead said DDS, dentist. So he gave it to the dental director of the Department of Public Health in the province of Saskatchewan. And it was a gentleman by the name of Art Cheglin, and he invited me to visit him if I was ever in Saskatchewan. I did, and we were sitting there, and we were talking, and we got onto the subject of dental therapists, and he said, well, we call them dental nurses then, you're the first dentist in the continent that that has really been in favor of dental therapists. Why don't you come to Canada? And I said, to do what? And he goes like this, to take his job. He was at a retirement age. Well, he never, they wouldn't let him retire for some years, and he said, well, while you're waiting, why don't you go to public counsel? It'll help you when you get to take this position. And this was about 1959 when I met Art Cheglin. They didn't let him retire. I went to public health school, and that really was a big change, a major change in my career. The other major change was when I was about to become a partner in Max Shane's group practice, because the dental therapy program fell through. And I was about to become a partner when I got a call from UCLA asking if I would be interested in working on this program, on this research project, studying medical staff organization in hospitals. But I figured I could always be a dentist. But this was an opportunity, even though I'd sworn I'd never go back to a university again after that great dental education experience. I decided, well, I'd risk it, it would be interesting, and I did. And we were very fortunate, we had a book published. As I said, it was good fiction, but it did approximate some, I hope, reality. Anyway, Max and I continued to work together in different ways, and one of the things we did, we started initial office evaluations. This was at Blue Cross of Southern California, was just beginning to develop a capitation plan, what today sometimes we call them HMOs or whatever, different names. And in order to get on the panel of the capitation plan, the office had to meet certain criteria. So I had developed the protocols, and we developed a little schedule to look at and to go through and to examine, to examine the office. And one of the offices we went to was really kind of interesting. There were 3 operatories at one end of the room. In the center of the room, there was a chair and an X-ray unit. And then opposite that was the waiting room chairs. And this was in South Central Los Angeles, or Watts. In other words, this was a practice for people by 2 very well-meaning dentists. They both had practices, or maybe they were partners in a practice in Beverly Hills. This office, where they were really doing good for this poor population, had this, as I said, this chair in the center, and they seated the patient while we were there, and the dental assistant comes out and takes out the lead apron and puts the apron on herself, and then starts taking the X-ray. So she wasn't stupid. I mean, she knew she needed to be protected. At any rate, we also found out that in that office they were still boiling instruments. They didn't have an autoclave. And I asked the doctor, I said, well, what do you have in your Beverly Hills office? He said, oh yes, we have an autoclave. I said, well, I tell you what, I want you to buy an autoclave for this office. Send me a receipt. I don't have to come back. I'll trust you. And also, I want you to buy a second apron for the patient. Which he did, as far as I know. Anyway, what this really reminds me of, are you all familiar with The Jungle by Upton Sinclair? Well, Upton Sinclair wrote this novel, hoping to really change the world. It was basically, at the very end of the last chapter, this poor working man stumbles drunk into this audience, into this lecture hall, and they won't let him fall asleep, and he has to listen, and what he's listening to is the speaker giving a major appeal for socialistic society. And what Upton Sinclair said, what happened in the, as a result of the publication of the book, Teddy Roosevelt thought it was great, and they passed legislation to clean up the meat industry. Because it was, for those of you who know, The Jungle was the study of the corrupt meatpacking industry. And Upton Sinclair said, well, we did get the legislation to clean up the industry. I had aimed for the people's heart, and all I had hit was their stomach. Well, in a sense, all of this office evaluation stuff that's going on, we aim to really protect the patient, to improve and elevate the quality of care and the standard of care. What we did achieve in great part is cleaning up the office. The sterilization procedures are better, office record procedures are better, but in fact, the level of patient care isn't nearly as good as it should be. These programs are usually so poorly capitated that the dentist, in order to, what they consider make what they feel they have to make, they have add-ons and upgrades, which is simply a way of exploiting the patient to get more money out of them. Anyway, I really enjoyed clinical practice. It was really fun before gloves. And the insecurities of evidence-based practice, you know, we really didn't have to worry about whether what we were doing was really necessary or essential. But, so anyway, ignoring the safety and security of independent practice, which is I thought I wanted for most of my career, I ended up working for others, but not so much to take direction as to give direction. That was one of the defects that I had. Whenever I moved into a situation, I didn't think of myself as an employee. I kind of felt myself as sort of the director. And so I had a lifelong career trying to direct other people. But trying to do the right thing has hazards, especially when it comes up to tradition. And you know, good ideas are really admirable until you try to put them into practice. So I think everyone should have at least 9 lives and a lucky star of serendipity. Because most of the things that happened in my career weren't a thoughtful process. Something where I said, now this is the right thing to do. Things that sort of happened by fortune. I think maybe I was responsible for a little bit of it, but serendipity played such a big part in my life. And although all of these positions start well, you know, everybody thinks when you start you're enthusiastic, you're idealistic, but somehow or other, they don't always turn out well. Sometimes they end up badly. Of course, never do anything that I had to do. I was responsible for it. But then, somehow or other, something interesting, sometimes better comes along, and somehow you survive all these ups and downs until you arrive, at long last, here at APHA, at a rural health section, at home. So, to all of you here, to those of you who are out there in the trenches, fighting to serve the underserved populations, and to protect the nation's health and welfare, I'm so proud to be among you, and so honored to be the recipient of your award. Thank you.
So once again, congratulations, Jay. Your contributions will resonate through the oral health community and the public health community for many years to come. Thanks again to the Colgate Oral Pharmaceuticals and to Tabata Sandberg for being here. At this point, we will adjourn for now, and for those attending, head over to our dinner at Chevy's Fresh Mexico. Thank you for being here. Yes, Jay.